Chapter 11. The ninth month. Full transformation. The morning was quiet, the sun just beginning to rise over the horizon, casting a soft golden glow across the rooftops of Konoha. In the small apartment she now shared with Ino, Naruto stood in front of the mirror, staring at the reflection that had once been so foreign to her, but now, after 9 long, agonizing months, felt like it belonged to her. There was no trace of the boy she used to be. Not in her face, not in her body, not in the way she moved. The transformation was complete. Standing before the mirror, she was an exact replica of Ino, down to the smallest detail. Her long, platinum blonde hair cascaded in soft waves down her back. Her fair skin flawless and smooth. Her face was delicate, with high cheekbones, full lips, and large, expressive blue eyes framed by long, elegant lashes. The whisker marks that had once defined her face, the last remnants of her old identity, had faded completely, leaving nothing behind to indicate that she had ever been Naruto Uzumaki. Her body, too, had fully taken on Ino's feminine form. Her once broad, muscular shoulders were now soft and rounded, her arms slender and graceful. Her waist was narrow, her hips wide and curvy, her thighs thick and strong, in a way that felt entirely different from the strength she had once known. Her breasts, full and soft beneath the fabric of the shirt she wore, were a constant reminder of just how completely she had changed. There was nothing left of the boy she had been. She was, for all intents and purposes, a woman now. And yet, despite the overwhelming physical transformation, there was still a part of her that clung to the identity she had always known, the part of her that had fought for this village, that had trained and bled and sacrificed for her friends, for her dream of becoming Hokage. That part of her was still there, deep inside, even if it was hard to see in the reflection staring back at her. No. Naruko now took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with the motion. The name had been Ino's suggestion, a way for her to start fresh, to embrace the person she had become while still holding on to the essence of who she had been. It had taken time to get used to, and even now, it still felt strange to hear people call her by the new name. But she was starting to accept it, slowly, piece by piece. Naruko. It was a small change, but it was hers, a way to reclaim some part of her identity, even as everything else about her had shifted. Ino entered the room quietly, her soft footsteps barely audible against the wooden floor. She had been giving Naruko more space lately, understanding that this final stage of the transformation was something she needed to process on her own. But now, as she stood in the doorway, watching Naruko stare at her reflection, she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride for how far her friend had come. "You look beautiful," Ino said softly, stepping into the room and coming to stand beside her. Naruko glanced at her, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Do I?" Ino nodded, her gaze warm and reassuring. "You do. And more importantly, you look at peace." Naruko turned back to the mirror, her eyes tracing the curves of her body, the soft, feminine lines that now defined her. She was at peace, in a way. The months of fighting, of resisting the changes, were behind her. She had accepted that this was who she was now, but that didn't mean it was easy. "I don't feel like Naruto anymore," Naruko admitted, her voice quiet, almost fragile. "I look in the mirror, and I don't see him at all." Ino placed a hand on her shoulder, her touch gentle but grounding. That's because you're not Naruto anymore. You're Naruko now. But that doesn't mean you've lost who you are. You're still you, deep down. No matter what your body looks like. Naruko sighed, her eyes dropping to the floor. I know, but it's hard sometimes. I feel like I'm losing pieces of myself, little by little. Ino squeezed her shoulder gently. You're not losing anything, Naruko. You're just evolving. And that's okay. It's okay to change. It doesn't make you any less of who you were. Naruko looked up at Ino, her blue eyes filled with uncertainty. Do you really believe that? Ino smiled softly, her eyes filled with quiet confidence. I do. And I think, and deep down, you believe it too. You're just scared. Naruko swallowed hard, her throat tight. I am scared. I'm scared of what people will think, of how they'll treat me now. I'm scared that they won't see me as Naruto anymore, that they'll just see this. Ina's expression softened, and she stepped closer, her hand still resting on Naruko's shoulder. People might see you differently at first, but the people who really know you, who really care about you, they'll see past the changes. They'll still see you. And the people who don't? They don't matter. Naruko nodded, though the weight of Ino's words still pressed heavily on her chest. She knew Ino was right. She knew that her friends Sakura, Kakashi, even Sasuke would still see her for who she was, regardless of what she looked like. But that didn't make it any easier to face the world as this new version of herself. I guess I just have to take it one day at a time, Naruko said quietly, her gaze lingering on her reflection. Ino smiled, her hand sliding down to give Naruko's arm a reassuring squeeze. Exactly. And you're not alone in this. You've got me. You've got your friends. We'll all be here to help you through it. Naruko's chest tightened with emotion, and she blinked back the tears that threatened to spill over. She didn't know what she would have done without Ino. Through everything, through the fear, the confusion, the anger, Ino had been there, steady and unwavering. Naruko wasn't sure she would have made it this far without her. Thank you. I'm Ino, Naruko whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For everything. Ino smiled, her eyes soft and understanding. You don't have to thank me, Naruko. I'm just glad I could be here for you. Naruko smiled, though it was small and hesitant. Still, thank you. The first time Naruko walked through the village as her new self, the experience was nothing short of surreal. She had been out in public before, of course, during the earlier stages of the transformation, but this was different. This time, there was no trace of Naruto Uzumaki left. She was completely Naruko now, a perfect replica of Ino in every physical way. As she made her way through the familiar streets of Konoha, she could feel the eyes of the villagers on her. Some of them stared openly, their expressions a mix of confusion and curiosity. Others whispered among themselves, their voices too low for Naruko to hear, but loud enough that she could feel their scrutiny. It was as if they were trying to place her, to figure out who she was and why she looked so much like Ino. Naruko's heart pounded in her chest, her footsteps faltering slightly as the weight of their stares pressed down on her. She had always been used to attention. After all, as Naruto, she had never been one to shy away from the spotlight. But this was different. This wasn't the kind of attention she was used to. This was the kind of attention that made her feel exposed, vulnerable. She tried to shake off the feeling, reminding herself of what Ino had told her. The people who really know you will still see you for who you are. But that didn't stop the knot of anxiety from tightening in her stomach as she continued walking. It wasn't until she reached the training grounds that she finally saw a familiar face. Hey! Hey! Naruko! Sakura called out, jogging over to her with a bright smile. She hesitated for a split second before using the new name, but the warmth in her voice was genuine. Naruko smiled, though it was small and tentative. Hey! Hey! Sakura! Sakura stopped in front of her, her eyes scanning Naruko's new form with a mixture of curiosity and concern. How are you feeling? Naruko shrugged, her expression uncertain. I'm adjusting. It's weird. It's weird. You know, I look in the mirror and I don't even recognize myself anymore. Sakura nodded, her expression soft. I can't even imagine what you're going through. But, for what it's worth, you still feel like the same person to me. Naruko's chest tightened with emotion, and she gave Sakura a small, grateful smile. Thanks, thanks. Sakura! That means a lot. Sakura smiled back, her eyes warm. Of course, of course. And hey, if you ever need to talk or, I don't know, vent about anything, I'm here. Naruko nodded, feeling a little lighter. I appreciate that. As they stood there, talking, Naruko felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. Sakura's acceptance, her willingness to see past the physical changes and still treat her like the same person, was a small but important step in helping Naruko come to terms with her new reality. It was a reminder that, despite everything, she was still Naruko, still herself. Over the next few weeks, Naruko began to settle into her new life. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when she felt completely lost, when she looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back at her. But she was learning to navigate the complexities of her new identity, slowly but surely. The village, too, was beginning to adjust. There were still whispers, still stares, but gradually, people started to accept her as Naruko. Some of the villagers were curious, others were indifferent, and a few were even supportive. But no matter what their reactions were, Naruko was learning not to let it define her. She had taken on a few missions as Naruko, working alongside her friends and teammates as she always had. The missions were a reminder that, despite the changes in her body, she was still capable, still strong, still skilled, still a ninja. The physical differences were something she was learning to adapt to, but they didn't diminish her abilities. Ino continued to be a constant source of support, offering both practical advice and emotional reassurance whenever Naruko needed it. They would spend hours together, talking, training, even just sitting in comfortable silence. Ino had become more than just a friend to Naruko. She had become a lifeline, a beacon of stability in a world that had been turned upside down. One evening, as the sun set over the village, casting a warm, golden light across the rooftops, Naruko sat on the roof of the apartment she shared with Ino. She stared out at the village, her thoughts quiet and reflective. This body, this life, it wasn't what she had expected. It wasn't what she had wanted. But after 9 months of struggle, of fear and uncertainty, she was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, this was who she was meant to be. Not Naru. Not no. But Naruko. The thought was both terrifying and freeing. As the sky darkened and the stars began to appear, Naruko took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air fill her lungs. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, She wasn't afraid of it. She was Naruko now. And that was enough.